Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. So glad you are here. Welcome to Love and Abuse. My name is Paul, and all the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I think that advice has been passed down through the ages, and I think it's good advice, which is why I repeat it here. And I've got an email that I'm going to get right into. This person says, "My husband is emotionally abusive and just started your Healed Being program. I've been listening to your podcast and heard that the abuser wants the victim to feel bad. I want my husband to feel bad, guilty, ashamed for how he treated me. He destroyed the person I once was. Does that make me emotionally abusive as well?" Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry you had to go through this. A couple pieces of good information here. He's joined Healed Being. If you haven't heard about that, or at least anyone else who's listening now, that's over at healedbeing.com. It's for the emotional abuser that wants to change. And if you are in a relationship with an emotionally abusive person and they say they want to change, they want to heal, and they want help, then you can suggest that program for sure. I don't recommend suggesting programs like that or Healed Being itself for anyone that isn't willing to and ready to change. Because here's what happens. If you suggest some sort of healing program or therapy to anyone that has been emotionally abusive toward you and they're not ready for it, or they don't believe they're being abusive or hurtful, or they think that you're the problem, what you'll end up doing is, you may end up doing is causing them to resist that even more or avoid it even more. And what I mean by that is it's just like if somebody came up to you and said, "Here, I really want you to read this book. It's all about politics and war and viruses." I mean, I'm saying all this stuff that's current events right now that maybe you hear enough of and maybe you don't want to read any more about it or hear any more about it. You just want to get away from it. And if somebody tries to stuff something in your face that you want to get away from, you're more likely to not only resist it, but never pick it up again in the future. Because you're not there. You're not in that space. And if you are in that space, then that's fine. You can read something like that. But I'm trying to relate to a lot of people that have heard enough about it and have lived through all this stuff. If you're not in that space and someone tries to put you in that space and you're not ready for it, you're going to be highly resistant to it, and you may even be repelled by the person and the content. Which is why it's important to understand that if somebody's not ready or in that space, they're not receptive, that it's probably not a good idea to say, "Why don't you do this? You should do this. It'll be very helpful." I mean, there are times when you can say that to your best friend. "Hey, you should try this. It was great for me, and it was great for people that I know." That can work sometimes, but in the case where there's an emotionally abusive person, if you gave them helpful material to help them stop being a way that they don't believe is wrong, then you might be wasting your time. Not only wasting your time, but turning them against it for the future. They may reconsider in the future if the accountability is bad enough and you say, "Look, if you don't change, this is going to happen, and I mean it," and then you do mean it, and they finally go, okay, I'll change. What do I need to do? I feel so bad that I've hurt you. Now I'm ready to look at whatever you have. They may do it then, if they're not trying to pull a fast one. But if they're serious, if they really want to change, if they really want to heal themselves, then they're going to say it. look, I've been so awful to you, and I'm so sorry. I want to change. I don't want to ruin this relationship. I don't want to screw this up. I really want to change. What do I need to do? What should I do? Now, hopefully, if they really want to change, they'll seek the information themselves. This is something that I probably haven't talked about before, but if somebody really wants to change, they're going to seek the information for themselves. The impetus for that change is usually someone else saying, hey, you're being hurtful. Please stop it. And I'm sure the words would come out different and the energy behind those words would be different when it's said, but that's pretty much the gist of it. When somebody says, hey, you're being hurtful, you need to stop. And if you don't stop, I'm going to blank. I'm going to leave. I'm going to stay at my mom's. I'm going to leave for a week. I'm going to deny you sex, or I'm going to deny you something else for a month, whatever it is. If it's not a romantic relationship, the sex thing won't work. But you know what I'm saying. You just provide accountability. And then when they say, I'm going to change, and they don't, or they repeat behavior that you already told them is hurting you, then you follow through. If you don't follow through, you will find out that the behavior gets repeated and they really don't see any incentive to change. That's the most important part of anything I share with you, is that if you say you're going to do something to make them accountable for their behavior and you don't do it, expect it to never end. Don't expect any change at all. Because as soon as they realize that not changing has no consequences, they'll do it again. I hope there are exceptions to that rule, but I haven't seen any. I was going to say too many, but I haven't seen any. When there's no accountability, the person doesn't change. When the person is finally facing some sort of accountability, then that's when it's serious enough where they finally start to reflect on their behavior, or at least reflect on what they're going to lose if they don't update or change their behavior. And that's when they usually want to seek change. And that's why I created Healed Being. If someone's listening to this now and someone's receptive to it, or someone you know is receptive to it, then you can sign up for that program over there, healedbeing.com. The main point of this email, though, let me get back to it, is that she says, I've been listening to your podcast and I heard that the abuser wants the victim to feel bad. That's not the only thing, but yes, in a nutshell, I define emotional abuse as making someone feel bad, and even more, making them feel bad about themselves. And if they feel bad or feel bad about themselves, that is a place of power for the abusive person. Because if the other person is feeling bad, if they are trying to explain themselves, if they're trying to defend themselves, if they're trying to make the other person see that they had good intentions, as long as they feel bad or they're on the defense or they feel guilty, then the other person has power. And that's how the emotional abuse continues, is that as long as you feel bad or shame or guilt or any of that stuff, the other person has power, because now you're in a place of no power. And there's sometimes a feeding effect, that you feed someone's power by being in that negative space. It gives them that power. And that may not be what they're after. They may not be after power. They just may be trying to fulfill a need that they don't know how to fulfill any way else. They don't know how to do it in a healthy way. That can happen as well. But still, everything I teach on this show is valid. Everything I tell you to in order to respond or react to emotional abuse is certainly valid, even if the other person is unintentionally doing it and unintentionally hurting you. It can happen. I know there are people out there that think, well, if you're hurting someone, you must know that you're hurting them. And it's not always the case, but when you are hurt by someone, yes, you should mention it. You should say something. You should ask one of my favorite questions, or at least one of the most valid and pointed questions, which is, do you realize your behavior hurts me? Do you realize what you're doing right now It's hurting me. It's hurtful to me. It really hurts that you're doing it. Do you know that you're doing it? And if they say, well, it's not hurting you, that's the invalidation. Or they turn it around and say, I'm hurting you, you're hurting me. It doesn't matter, because you just need to know, yes or no, if they know their behavior hurts you. If they finally say, well, no, I don't know, and I don't really think it's true, another invalidation, you can say, well, it does. It hurts me when you do that. So now that you know, this is the second question, now that you know it hurts me, will you stop? And what they say from this point on is going to be very important to you, because if they say, well, no, because, now you know they won't stop hurting you. And that is a very important question to have the answer to. If they won't stop hurting you, then you are in a situation where you know someone's going to continue hurting you. It has to be a 100% fact in your mind that if you stick around this person, they will continue hurting you. No doubt. Because they said, no, I'm not going to stop. Even if they say, because you make me mad, or because you did this to me 10 years ago, or because this and because that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what they say. If they say, no, I'm not going to stop hurting you, then that's all you need to know. So I kind of went off tangent there, but I wanted to get on that soapbox for a second because I needed to make sure that that part was understood about if someone knows they're hurting you and they continue to do it and they don't want to stop doing it, now you know who you're dealing with. Now let me get to this person's question, which is, I want my husband to feel bad, guilty, and ashamed for how he treated me. He destroyed the person I once was. Does that make me emotionally abusive as well? The answer is no. The answer is something that I talk about in the Healed Being program, actually, where I tell the people taking the program that it's very similar to falsely imprisoning someone for years. Let's just say that you've been married, or you've been in this relationship, or you've known the person, whoever it is, for a number of years, and they've been hurtful and belittling and invalidating and making you feel defensive and making you feel bad all the time. Let's just say that was happening for years and years. That I liken to an emotional prison. It feels like you're in this prison that you can't escape, and no matter how hard you try, you can't escape all these negative emotions, and they do their best to keep you in that place of no power. So it feels like an emotional prison, and they feel like not only the prosecutor, but also the prison guard. So they are standing next to you, they are standing over you, they are making sure that you stay in your place, they are making sure that you stay under control, that you stay within the confines of your emotional prison, so that you won't escape and start thinking as an individual, as an independent, so that you don't have thoughts that stray outside their comfort zone. Because you're in this emotional prison for sometimes years, sometimes decades, what ends up happening is that you get stripped away of the very things that you said in your email. He destroyed the person I once was. I felt bad, I felt guilty, and I want him to feel bad, and I want him to feel guilty, and I want him to feel ashamed. That's because what ends up happening is that when the abusive person starts healing, because you said he's taking my program, which means you must have laid out some accountability, unless he had an epiphany one day and said, wow, I'm hurting this person, I better stop. If he had the accountability or the epiphany, either way, at least it sounds like he's off to a good start and going along the right path, which is great. But what ends up happening here is that he finally let you out of your cell. He finally released you from this emotional prison. And let's just say that you were in there for a decade. A decade of being held against your will, a decade of being falsely imprisoned with your emotional liberties being taken away, feeling so oppressed, feeling like you're trapped, and never being able to experience the totality of all there is to be yourself, to be able to express yourself freely, to be able to express to someone else without being manipulated or deceived or controlled or abused or hurt in any way. When you're finally free of that, you come out of there like you just walked out of a real prison after a number of years, and you have no idea how the world works anymore. Like, I just wrote to somebody, I forget what it was, but I told her that, it's like coming out of a penitentiary after 50 years. You have no idea the technology that has come out. The people have changed. The internet is here now, and all this stuff has happened. And you've been in there for 50 years. You don't know what's up. You don't know what's real. You don't know what to do. You're trying to figure everything out. So there's that part. Part of that is the confusion. A lot of that is reconnecting with yourself. More of it is rediscovering who you are and what you want in your life. And then you get to the part where you have withheld so much anger and so much hurt and maybe even so much hate, if that's in there. You just have all this negativity that is built up for so long, and you're finally free. And what happens is the other person, the perpetrator of the hurtful behavior, aka prison guard, they realize what they've done. They've set you free, and now they want the relationship to go to a better place because they're no longer hurting you. And a lot of them believe that once you stop hurting someone, that everything should be okay again. And this is the hardest part for emotionally abusive people to understand, is that once you release them from this emotional prison, and I know I'm just using this as an analogy. I don't mean to paint such a dismal picture, but sometimes it feels this way. But using this analogy, once you release someone from this emotional prison, the rebuilding process is going to take a lot of time, and you're going to have to face what appears to be abusive behavior from the other person. Not because they're abusive, but because they've had all these repressed negative emotions, have been in there for so long, they've been wanting to escape. And so the pendulum has swung full force all the way to the other side, where at one time it was on this side where you had the emotionally abusive person and the victim, and now it's swung all the way to the other side, where the emotionally abusive person has said, hey, you're free, you should be happy now. And the victim is thinking, what? What just happened? What? This is great that you've stopped doing this, but now I have to do something with all this energy that has built up. I am so angry. I just want you to hurt for all the hurt you did to me. And this is the difference, is that the person who's been abused for so long wants the other person to go through some sort of suffering or punishment and feel what they felt, at least a tiny little sliver of what they felt, in hopes that they will understand just how far they pushed the person in their life, just how far the emotional abuser pushed and emptied this wonderful person, that used to feel good about themselves. They feel empty now. They feel like they have to start over, and you just took away so many years of my life that I want you to feel that, so that you have some sort of accountability for what you did. Because I don't want you to just go, oh, I'm hurting you, I'm so sorry, we should be okay now. They don't want that to happen. I mean, I don't think you do. You probably don't want that to happen. The abused person doesn't want the abuser to just go, oh, I'm sorry, that will never happen again. Let's go get ice cream. They don't want it to work that way. They need to show them just how much the emotional abuser pushed the victim. They want to see that person hurt. They want to make sure that they understand just how bad it was. And when you get to a point where the emotionally abusive person does decide to change and does decide to stop the behavior, I say this in Healed Being too, is when that happens, when the abuser stops abusing and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and they mean it. I'm really sorry. I can't believe I did that to you. I'm really sorry. And they won't do it ever again, which is great. If that's the case, that's great. The abusive person has to know that they're going to get all of the energy that the other person has been repressing. It's going to come back maybe tenfold. It's going to come back hard. It doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot. A lot of victims of emotional abuse have all this stored energy, especially if they're going to stay in the relationship. If they either have to stay because they don't have the means to leave, or they want to stay because they do want the relationship to work out, there will be a period where they get so upset and they feel so angry, or they just want the other person to hurt just to experience what they went through, or at least a small part of what they went through, or a big part, almost just to say, see, this is what it feels like. But the difference between emotionally abusive behavior and the repressed energy that I'm talking about, all those years of oppression, is that the emotionally abusive person isn't doing it because of some sort of payback or vendetta or anything like that. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it as part of a coping mechanism, or many coping mechanisms, that they've learned since childhood in order to get what they want in life. And the emotionally abusive person, their typical reason for doing it is to control or change others so that they don't have to change themselves. That is something they do. And the victim of emotional abuse, who then seems to act abusive back after being released from this proverbial emotional prison, they just have a lot of pent-up negative energy that they have to release. They have to get it out of their system. But it's not intrinsic. It's not based on coping mechanisms. It's just based on having suffered for so long. And I'm not saying that emotionally abusive people haven't suffered. I'm sure a lot of them have. I know a lot of them have. But it wasn't the victim who made them suffer. The emotionally abusive person went through suffering in some other way, probably. And if they didn't, they learned these behaviors in another way. But the victim of emotional abuse, they are the victim of the person who made them suffer, and they're still with them. And now they have to face them, and this other person, if they're on a healing path, it's going to seem like they're okay, but you're not. And now you need to go through this flushing of your system to get it out. And that might mean that you do a big release on them many times. I warn the people who are healing from being emotionally abusive that they will get unleashed upon. They may, but a lot of the times this happens. When the other person feels free to express themselves, to be themselves, and they start reconnecting with their power again, they're going to reconnect with something so strong inside of them that they're going to feel emotionally strong to now protect themselves in a way they've never protected themselves. And this is where I'm going with you, this person who wrote the email, is that there were so many years that you didn't protect yourself. And you may have tried, you may have done everything you can, you may have defended yourself, but you didn't really protect yourself in many ways. I don't know exactly what you did, but I'm going to assume that you didn't really protect yourself the way you wanted to. Meaning, when the first sign of abusive behavior started in the relationship, you didn't go, oh no, this isn't going to happen. You're never going to do that again. That would be a really good way to protect yourself. I'm not saying it would work with everyone, and I'm not saying that you should do it with violent or aggressive people, because sometimes you can't reason with them, but somebody who does bad behavior needs to know, hey, you're doing bad behavior. I don't like it. This better not happen again. That is one way to protect yourself. And when it happens again, if you didn't protect yourself the first time, or if you did and it happens again, but you aren't as protective or not protective at all the second time, and it just happens, and there's no accountability for it, then it starts happening more and more and more. And then that self-protection that you once had or maybe never did It hides way in the background. It's that personal protector, your own guard dog, your own watchtower watching over you, that when that gets pushed into the background, then the person who would say, oh no, you're not going to do that, that is hurtful behavior and I won't accept it. The person who would say that is now stuffed away. They're way in the background. And I don't want you to blame yourself for doing that. This is what happens. This is part of the emotional abuse cycle, is that the person that is emotionally abusive, they know how to hide that watchdog, that self-protector from you. They know how to hide it. They know how to get in the vulnerable areas in your mind and in your heart so that you don't feel like you need to use that watchdog. So that watchdog in the watchtower gets put way in the back and doesn't have to come out, or at least you believe it doesn't have to come out. And part of that is because you've been convinced that it's not needed. This is what happens. You're let out of this emotional prison and you find that watchdog again. It's back there. It's in there, way up in that watchtower. And you open the door and you say, there you are. I've been looking for you. This is who I've needed. And of course, it's you. It's you in that room. That's you, ready to protect yourself, ready to stand up for yourself, ready to finally fight back. I'm not saying you should fight back. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying this is what happens. I'm saying when you find who you are at the deepest level, you stand up for yourself. You finally feel free because you no longer feel oppressed. So the emotionally abusive person gets very surprised by this person because they've never seen them. I've never seen this part of you. Who are you? You're being so mean. You're emotionally abusive now. No, I'm just doing something that I should have done a long time ago. I'm finally protecting myself, and you're never, ever going to do that to me again. I would like you to be there. I want you to be in that space. I want you to feel that energy. I want you to have that energy. And if you're not there, it is in you. It is definitely in you. And the person who wrote, that's what this is. This is that oppressed person coming out and finally kicking their butt for once. And it's not emotional abuse when it's based on that protective energy and wanting them to feel what they did to you, because you've been falsely imprisoned for so long. So I don't want you to put yourself down. And I will say this, yes, if it goes on for many, many months or even years, like if you feel this oppressed energy for years and years, and you're always now treating them like you said, wanting them to feel bad, wanting them to feel ashamed, we have to look at that too, because that happens when you feel like you don't have any closure. If you don't feel like you've had closure, then you probably haven't said enough. You probably haven't dug deep enough to really express the pain you felt. And if you have dug deep enough and you think you've expressed everything, then there is a point where you need to ask yourself, am I going to work on this relationship or not? Because if you can't let it go, if you can't let go of that upset, and I mean, it may take you months. It may take you even a year. I like to give a time frame of 6 months to a year. If you can't let it go within 6 months to a year, then you need to do something else. You need to go to therapy, at least by yourself, or you need to have a serious conversation and just say, hey, look, I'm always mad at you and I want to talk about it and I don't want to be mad at you, or I know you've been trying, if they've been actually working on themselves, if they've been healing, and it seems that they're doing all the right things now, it's time to have a serious discussion. And if this is a romantic relationship or even a family relationship where it has gone on a while, you also have to access the love that you once had and find out if it's still there. You have to find out if that love is still there, because you can be in love and you can love the person. Are you in love with this person still? You may not be. Sometimes that goes away. You may still love the person though. So you may still have some struggle or conflict there, but I think it's important to be clear about that. I think it's important to address that inside yourself. Do I still love this person? If you say, yes, I still love this person, then you ask, well, why am I still angry at them? Why am I still making them feel bad or putting them down? Why is that? And then you'll have to explore that and figure that out. Well, I want them to feel pain. Yeah, but why? Well, because they put me through pain. Okay, well, how much more pain is necessary for them to experience until you are satisfied? You need to ask yourself these questions. You need to challenge yourself with these questions. And you may say they need to suffer forever. That may be your answer, but you need to come to that conclusion. Because when you hear yourself say they should suffer forever, you'll probably hear something else too. You'll probably hear yourself say, well, maybe not forever. You'll probably hear yourself say that. Or maybe not. I might be wrong, but there's usually a point where you go, okay, I've made them suffer enough. We got to either work this out or I got to leave or something. And that would be great. You get to that point. And if you can't get to that point, what I've often seen is that the person that's been abused for a long time and then they come back feeling self-protective and making the other person pay or feel the suffering like they did, it can often be that the victim of the emotional abuse hasn't found themselves again. They haven't come back to who they are, or they've lost themselves completely. And it just upsets them so much. It upsets them so much that they can't reconnect with themselves, that now they don't know who they are. And if that's the case, if that's you, I think it's very important to either find that person inside of you who you once were, because that would be a good question. Who was I before this? If you can't find that person, that's okay. It's all right, because this is your time to rebuild. And rebuilding is really cool too, because you can ask yourself, who do I want to be? Because who you were kind of put you in this bad space in the first place. I'm not blaming who you were. I'm not saying that because of who you were this happened, because there are people out there that, like I said, they can sneak past your watchtower. They can sneak all this stuff under your radar and you won't know it. So I don't blame you for that at all. I blame them. But if you can't reconnect with the person that you once felt good about inside yourself, that you once were able to connect with and feel whole, then you may need to rebuild. Who do I want to be is the question. Who do I want to be? Well, you know what? This time, I'm not going to let anyone pull that crap on me. That's the first layer of this foundation, and I'm just going to build upon that. And as you build upon that, you will build a stronger, better, more complete self. Because it's not only going to be based on protecting yourself. You're going to be able to change those layers around and move the foundation and mold you who you want to be. But sometimes you have to start with the most prevalent, most important layer just to start the foundation, just to get started. So I hope this person who wrote, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. There is something called reactive abuse, but it usually happens while the abuse is still going on. From your message, because this person, your husband, started the Healed Being program, they probably have at least curbed or stopped the behavior altogether, which is fantastic. And since he's not doing that behavior anymore, you may not be reacting to his behavior, but are trying to find yourself, and you're really upset that you can't find her anymore, or at least a part of you that you once knew. And so that would certainly lead to the behavior you're talking about. But I do not call that emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is a much more insidious thing, and it usually is prevalent throughout the entire relationship, and there's a much different intention behind it. I hope this helps you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. If you want to pinpoint the exact behaviors causing the difficulties in your relationship, including identifying all the signs of possible emotional abuse, head over to loveandabuse.com. The workbook provides an evaluation of your relationship based on a 200-point assessment. You'll find it useful for just about any difficult relationship. Once you start checking the boxes, you're going to have insights you've never had before. If you want to pinpoint the unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad, let the workbook help you discover the specific components of bad behavior and put into words what you're experiencing. if you believe you're the difficult one or you're doing emotional abuse and you want to change that behavior, head over to healedbeing.com and start the program. Check it out. The first 4 lessons are free. And if you want to continue, you can start after lesson 4, but definitely check out the first 4 lessons. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.